Halloween. Spooky time of year, isn't it? I mean, you've got all those scary costumes and creepy decorations, and not only that, it gets darker earlier. Maybe those bumps and creaks you hear in the night sound a little more ominous. Almost like something elusive might be watching you, maybe even seeking to harm you. Well, in real estate, we get that same eerie feeling that comes with Halloween all through the year. And it comes from a lot of sources. But there are three that lie buried in the earth, deep underground. And sometimes they seek to resurface and haunt the living. So you know how in old horror movies, there's always that one overly curious person, scientist, whatever, they just happen to know Egyptian and how to read hieroglyphics, yet completely ignore the 400 warnings written all over the sarcophagus they're about to open. Things like never-ending evil, your death is nigh, you break it, you buy it, that kind of thing. They open it, they die, unleash the evil upon the earth, and then some superheroic person, I don't know, like the Hulk or Ruth Bader Ginsburg has to come in and save the day. Well, in those movies, we think, please don't get in there, don't do that. But in real estate, when we see dangerous things, we kind of need to inspect them. And what better place to start than with oil tanks? Why don't we go to me in the field? Me? Thanks, me. You know, oil tanks can be scary, as I was saying. And this one here has been buried in the ground for almost 70 years. And for most of those decades, it was providing this house with very warm, very comfortable oil heat. That is, until Mr. Gasline came along and ruined things for Mr. Oil Tank. And he came to an end. Was it a happy end? Well, that's where we're going to have to do some research. And we're going to have to go back to the lab to do that. So back to me, Ted. Now I want to make a clarification. When I say research, I'm not talking about the soil. No. We're not doing any kind of soil testing. That's for people like the EPA or other third-party companies that deal with that stuff. If the EPA is involved in your transaction, you're having a bad day. What we're talking about is finding out if that oil tank is truly out of service or not. Now, sometimes they've been completely removed from the property, dug out, land taken care of, all that stuff. But if it's still sitting there and it's just empty, discarded like some old corn husk, after all its years of function and service to the family, they just left it there, that's not a good thing. The happy end for an oil tank is if it's been decommissioned. That means it's been cleaned out, it's been filled with like foam or sand, or there's a number of different materials that tank companies will use, and that there's a certificate that's been recorded with your local municipality. In Seattle, we used to go through the fire marshal to do this. Now you can do it online with the city planning department. I'll include the link in the description. Outside of Seattle, you'll want to check with your fire department or fire marshal. They're usually the ones that are keeping the records for these things. And record keeping only started in 1996. So if something happened prior to that, you're probably out of luck on having documentation for it. Now, if the oil tank has not been decommissioned, we have a couple of options. If you're a seller, it might be a good idea to get that thing decommissioned before you go to market. You don't have to, and it does come with some expense. It's not cheap, but it is beyond just being a nice gesture. It will really help alleviate some of the fears your would-be buyers would have in buying a home that has an abandoned oil tank that has not been decommissioned. If you're a buyer, you would really like to see that thing taken care of before that property transfers ownership to you. I can't go into the legalities, I'm not an attorney, about who is responsible for what, but it sure would be nice to have that all taken care of before we have a close on a transaction and a transfer of ownership. It's just a cleaner and simpler way of doing things. Now, Ted, what if the house is still using oil in that tank? What if they've got an oil furnace and that's what they're using to heat the house? Great question. If you're a buyer in this situation, you'd really like to know if the current owner is signed up with PLIA, and that is the Pollution Liability Insurance Agency here in Washington State. And what they are is basically a supplemental insurance that can help if you ever have to have an environmental cleanup on your property due to that oil tank. And if they don't have that insurance, that's unfortunate. But once you buy the property, you want to make darn sure you sign up for it, because you just want to minimize any risk you have of being responsible for an environmental cleanup. But the most important thing is to know when you're going forward with a transaction, what is going on with that oil tank? You don't want to wake up in the middle of the night thinking about that oil tank and the unhappy end it met, and how it's going to haunt you for the next 30 years. Let's pretend it's not fall. It's not Halloween time. It's summer. And you are out at a friend's or a relative's property that's maybe just outside the city, or maybe it's way outside the city. And you're having a great time. You're strolling the grounds, you're drinking a large glass of iced tea, and all of a sudden you perceive something. Something's amiss. You notice that there's a large patch of lush green grass near the house, and you're thinking, hey, what are they using to get that grass to be like that? You don't want to know. But even so, because I'm your friend, I'm going to tell you. The reason that grass may look like that is, well, that may be the ghost of 1,000 expelled meals that have escaped their container and are now haunting that lawn. Now, that's more of a gross description than scary, but I guarantee you, if you own a septic system and you have to do major repairs or replace your system, you're going to shudder and quake in your shoes. It's very, very scary, and nobody wants to do that. Really, Ted? That's the description you're going to go with. The ghost of 1,000... I apologize. That was distasteful. What's really distasteful is the smell of sewer leaking up through your lawn. And so thankfully we don't deal with it a lot here in the city of Seattle. You go to places like Boulevard Park, or kind of in the outskirts of King County, or if over on Vashon Island, a lot of septic over there. And it's important to know what you're dealing with. So why don't we dive into a diagram that I have here, and I'll explain what it does. So you go to the bathroom, you wash your dishes, whatever you're doing, that all goes down the pipe. Usually that would go into a sewer main and out into your local municipal sewer treatment situation. However, you're on your own out here, and so you got to deal with it yourself. That's going into a tank, a septic tank. From there, that accumulates sludge and distributes the liquids out to a distribution box. That distribution box shoots that liquid into what is called a drain field. And over time, that drains into the earth, dissipates before it reaches the water table. That's key. And you have a safe environment. You've dealt with it in a safe, healthy way. But if your distribution box goes bad, your drain field starts plugging up, you have a bad septic tank, things can go sideways really quickly and very badly, and you want to avoid this. So we're fortunate in King County in that with every real estate transaction, we have to have the sewer system, or septic system inspected if it hasn't been inspected within the last 6 months. So thankfully, that's kind of a mandatory situation, but it's still kind of gross to know that stuff is still sitting out there just waiting for you. Well, this third thing, I'm afraid it's just as scary as the other two. I'm going to try to make it more relatable to life. As we get older, it's important for us to have regular checkups, and sometimes these checkups, well, they involve, how shall we say, indelicate procedures. Cameras have to be inserted into delicate places. And we'll just leave it at that. Your house really is no different. We're gonna learn about that sewer line, and it's gonna be unpleasant. We're gonna take a camera, and we're going to shove it down that pipe, and we're going to look around. In fact, why don't we take a look at some footage here? Now, this pipe that we're looking at, it is made of concrete. There's a few different materials that sewer lines are typically made of. The modern ones are made out of kind of a plastic ABS style pipe. We like that because they're usually pretty clean and they don't wear like some of the older materials. But this one is concrete, and concrete is terrible. It's old. It wears down really badly. Clay, which seems more brittle, is actually better from what I'm told. I'm not a sewer expert. So as we go through this line, we're going to try to go out to the water main. And on our way there, we want to see if there are things like roots. That's a pretty common thing. Breaks, offset pipes, dips, cracks, anything that might, lead to a failure of this pipe and end up backing, again, yucky stuff back up into your house. If you're fortunate, it'll come back as a clean line. That's great. If you're a little bit less fortunate, there'll be a few minor things, like maybe a couple of spot repairs. It might cost, $1,500, $2,500 or something like that. Still, I know it's a lot of money for people, but compared to having to replace that whole line, that's scary, and it's not a good time. There's a couple different ways to do it. You could have a guy come out and go, I'm going to insert some stuff into your pipe. It's going to go in there and it's going to harden, and it's called a liner, and it's not pretty. Or you can dig up the whole yard and put all new pipe down, make sure that's nice and clean, and take care of it that way. Both ways are still kind of spendy. But we're going to hope for the best. We're going to hope there's nothing in there, or that it's just got like a little belly where a little bit of water is gathering, or hopefully we don't run into any rats or ghosts of meals, as I so poorly put it earlier. The nice thing about sewer scopes are they're relatively inexpensive, and usually we have them done at the time we do home inspections. They typically run between $200 to $300, depending on how far out the line is, if they have to enter from multiple spots, if they have to remove toilets, that type of thing. Whoa, that was some scary stuff. But I'm glad we dealt with it, because if you avoid it or stick your head in the ground, you're going to get murdered, just like the people in those movies. You can't hide behind a wall of chainsaws and not expect to die. And if you don't do your research in real estate, you're hiding behind a wall of chainsaws. So I hope that was helpful. Check out the links below so you can get yourself some help and some information on these topics. And I hope to talk to you next time. I will be talking. I hope you're listening. And we'll see you then. Adios.